Hey everybody, welcome back to another Timer Tip Tuesday. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes here. As always, I'd like to just give everyone a minute or two to show up if they're running a bit late. For those of you already on, welcome. Thanks again for joining us. We'll be doing a session today on lap events, doing a deep dive on the features available to you and some use cases based on those features. So as always, we're going to record this session. We'll send out a video link once it's uploaded to YouTube after this is over and everything's been uploaded. We also have the slide deck actually in a handout in GoToWebinar today, and it also will be available once it's been posted after the fact if you wanted to follow along or take a deeper look at some things. I think we're good to go. A couple more people have arrived, so thanks again for joining us today. We're going to be doing a session on lap events. It's a pretty complicated feature and has a lot of different use cases, so we're going to go through all the different settings. We're going to talk about the ways you might want to use them and how you should configure and how you can configure race day scoring to be used for lap events in all sorts of different ways. So let's go ahead and get started. It will be probably bumping up to right at around an hour today. We have a lot to go through. So I will try and pause for questions as we go, but if you do have questions, feel free to ask them. I have David Drew and one of our developers, Michael, on the back end, who'll be helping out answer your questions as we go, and they'll be bringing up to me any very relevant questions that come in that everyone should know the answer to. So feel free to ask away using the questions panel and GoToWebinar on the right. And again, if you do wish to follow along on your own, you can download the handout which is a copy of the slide deck that we're going through now. And of course, we'll always be recording and sending out a link to this upon completion after it's uploaded to YouTube. So let's get started. So just the agenda for today, I'm going to give you an introduction to lap race scoring. I'm going to talk about the setup and explanation of different settings within race day scoring that pertain to lap races, timing location settings, scored event settings, and segment and lap settings. And then finally, I'm going to go through how to customize your reports for lap races, how to build out leaderboards using HTML files for lap races, and go through a couple of different use cases of lap races with race day scoring. Okay, so first off, if you're not familiar what lap race scoring is with race day scoring, lap race is basically you're no longer saying that everyone is doing a set distance. You're just saying that, hey, you can do as many laps as you want, and the person who happens to do the most amount of laps or has done the greatest total distance should be ranked first. So it's not a lap race is not like a 2-lap 10K. A lap race is that situation where everyone's doing a 1-mile course over and over and over and over and over again, and the system's just calculating who has done the most total distance at the end of the day. So just a quick example here, lap events are like a 24-hour ultramarathon in a set loop, a 6-hour mountain bike relay in a set loop, a cyclocross race, or a criterium bike race, or a 12-hour team relay in a set loop. Finishers are not expected to complete some set distance. So for example, a 50K that does run on a set loop, but it is exactly 50K, that's not exactly a lap race in our setup. It really is, it could be a multi-segment race. Now you may want to set it up for other reasons as a lap race and say you only want to accept 50 laps per person, or if it's a 1K lap, it'd be perfect, but you know what I'm saying. So you could set them up as a lap race, but it's not ideal. So unless there's some other reason why you wanted to use lap race scoring, we'd probably push you towards setting up as a multi-segment race instead. But yeah, so these are just a good distinction of what lap races are and what lap races are not. So just give you a quick breakdown of what the definition of the lap is in race day scoring. It's really important to understand this in order to understand more complicated scenarios. So race day scoring has a bunch of different pieces in the software. There's locations, which you see here, the start-finish location. There are segments, which are basically the combination of reads at a location. So a 2 mile segment here is basically like you start at the start finish and you finish at the start finish. So that's the segment. It's going from one point to another point. Now, a lap in RaceDay scoring is basically one or many segments that start and finish at the same location. So I'll explain it better in a second here. This is basically another version of what a lap could be. So a lap, again, in this case, the 2 mile lap consists of just one segment called 2 mile segment. So it's just your basic kind of scenario. You're doing start finish to start finish to start finish to start finish. That's your very basic straightforward lap race. There are other kinds of lap races where you may have a checkpoint. That's where this other kind of setup comes into play. So in this case, I have one lap. It happens to be called 7 mile lap. It consists of two segments, a 3 mile segment and a 4 mile segment. And the 4 mile goes from the checkpoint to the start finish, and the 3 mile goes from the start finish to the checkpoint. So one lap is considered to be when someone goes from the start finish to the checkpoint and back to the start finish. So at the end of the day, they finished where they started. So one of the major important things to understand about RaceDay scoring with lap races is that in order for it to be a lap, it must start and finish at the same location. So in this case, I have a lap that consists of two segments with a checkpoint in the middle. And this one, it's a lap that is one segment that starts and finishes the same location. So in RaceDay scoring, you can set up any number of lap options for your athletes to be able to complete. So many times what you see is that races will have a long lap and a short lap option. And the distinction between the two is based on, hey, this one lap, they hit a checkpoint in the middle of their lap. And that way I know that that's a long loop. And the other one is, they just do a start finish to a start finish. That must be a short loop. So what we see is something kind of like this. A shared start finish location, but the system knows that if they happen to hit a checkpoint in between two start finish reads, that must be a 7 mile lap. So this is the basis to understand all of the rest of the stuff we'll talk about. So it's really important you kind of grasp this. There's multiple layers here. Basically, we have a location, we have segments, we have laps. And putting those all together, you can build out some really complicated, really cool lap race scenarios. But you really have to understand it in order to set it up properly. So just, we have some more details here if you want to click this link and read through the setup guides for all this. We're going to be going through some more of it later, but I wanted to give you a breakdown. And I think the visual helps me, might not help others. It just kind of shows you the structure of the data that we're working with here. All right, so how are lap events scored? They're always ranked, again, by who has done the most distance over some laps that you have defined. Now, this is important. It's not total laps, because let's say you have a lap, a long and a short lap option. You don't want it to be based on the number of laps completed, because the long laps are longer than the short laps. You really want it to be based on who has done the longest total distance. So that's why it's important when you are setting things up to properly set your lap distances, especially if you're doing a multi-lap option race. So this means, again, the participant who has covered the same distance in a faster time, they're going to be ranked ahead of the participant who took longer. Okay, so the very first step in setting up lap races is actually adding and editing locations. This is a little bit different from the standard flow when you're setting up a non-lap race, so it's good to take into consideration. Basically, you have to mark a location as a lap event timing location in order for it to be used in your scored event setup. So the first thing you got to do, even before you get into scored events, is go to your locations and figure out what you need to do. Now, as many of you know, we always build a default start and finish location for RaceDay scoring races. As soon as you build it, you get these default start finish. Now, half the time that's not appropriate, right? So don't be afraid, go in, remove what you don't need. First thing, just go into locations, get rid of what you don't need. If you're doing a basic lap event, you're probably doing a common start finish location, and people are just doing it over and over and over again. That's your basic kind of race, right? So if that's the case, you would come into your timing locations, delete one of the timing locations, edit the other one, rename it to start finish, change it so that it is marked as a start finish location, and then set it to be a lap event timing location. Once you do that, you'll be able to actually use this location in a scored event that is a lap scored event. So just make sure that you do this, otherwise you'll get a little bit confused when you are setting up your scored events and trying to make them lapped events. Additionally, you remember we probably are doing common start finish for lap races. So typically you'd set your lap timing location to be start and finish. And then you want to take into account what your gap factor should be. So your gap factor is basically your minimum split time or your minimum lap time. So if you're doing a 1 mile lap, you probably aren't going to see any 4-minute milers for a long day out in the course. So you could set your gap factor to be 0.0040000, so that you're going to restrict the system from accepting another occurrence on that location unless it's greater than 5 minutes since the last time you were seen. And you have to do all the other standard filtering with the start. When do you want to stop considering finish or start times? When do you want to start considering finish times, and so on and so forth. Okay, so now that you got your location set up, next thing you'll want to do is start setting up scored events. There's a ton of settings in this, and I'm going to go through each of them one by one, explain to you what they do and why you want to use them and why you probably don't want to use half of them. So let's go ahead. So first thing, in the scored event, after you add one, make sure to check the lap event checkbox here. So this is what changes over the scoring from this event to be based on total distance instead of based on your who did the fastest over a set distance. So just go ahead, check this box, and then it will open up all the other features that I'm going to show you on the next screen here. Very first thing you need to do is set up a lap distance. So at the top here, you'll see, this is usually where you would see the event distance. This is where you set, it's a 5K or a 10K. In this case, you're going to tell the system what the default single lap distance is. So for a standard kind of event where you're just doing a single lap option, this is the only thing you need to worry about. Just set your lap distance, and your one lap that's going to get created for you will just have this distance set. So if we're doing a more complicated setup, we're going to talk about that later. You have the ability to have different distances for each lap you have. In this case, it's just a basic 1 mile course that people are doing over and over and over and over and over again. So over on the right, there's this area where you're setting up the start and finish location for this event. So, typically you'd set, if it's a common or a shared start finish for a regular race, it's the same kind of setup. You would set the start to be start finish and the finish to be start finish as well. Note that for this kind of event, you don't have to tell the system what occurrence you're finishing on, because that's not really how lap races work. There's not really a concept of finishing or an occurrence that finishes you. You're just trying to get as many occurrences as possible. So you don't have to tell the system to finish on a specific occurrence. So again, this is your basic kind of scenario if you're doing this here. What you can also do is change the default lap option to no, and then it's going to open you up to doing more complicated scenarios where you have multiple laps and things like that. So basically, when you're building out a lap race, think to yourself, is this a single loop option or is it a multi-loop option? If it's a single loop option, then you would use the default lap timing configuration. If it's a multi-loop option, you would not do that. And again, this is all about within this scored event. So in this scored event, each participant can do different laps. Then you'd want to use the more complicated non-default setup. But let's say it's like you have like 2 different scored events, one that does only long laps and one that only does short laps. You don't have to do the more advanced setup. You can just do default for that, because the participants within each event are just doing 1 lap option. in that case. Okay, so let's say we got that all figured out. The next thing that you'll want to do is take a look here at all of these new features that show up. So there's a lot here. I'm going to go through and try to explain them as best I can. They're sometimes a little complicated, so bear with me. The first option here is disregard every lap or every other lap. So basically, this is very useful if you need to ignore every other lap that participants complete. So it's going to mark each even lap as a rest period, which is going to subtract the time spent in each of those laps from the total time and distance of each athlete. So basically, like it's very common in a ultra marathon kind of setup. They'll have a timing location at the head of the trail or something, and they have a an area up at the top where they have a feed zone and a rest area where they can, take a nap or do whatever they need to do. And they hit the location, go out on course, do a lap, and then come back, and then go back into the rest area. What timers typically want to do is say all the time spent in the rest area, getting feed, taking a nap, doing whatever, should be subtracted because that doesn't count towards their total or something. So you could do something like that and say, okay, all that time spent between these start-finish reads that is not like going out on course and coming back should be subtracted from the total. So you can use that here. Another example of this is if you're doing a stair climb event where you have mats at the base of the stairs. They go up the stairs and they come back down, and then they go and hit the mats again when they start their next time going up the stairs. So all the time spent going, well, they have a mat at the top as well. So like all the time spent between the second read at the top and the bottom is going to be subtracted from the total. So in that case, they probably put 2 readers in one location and just say, hey, I don't care where they're getting a read, they're just getting a read. But so this is just a feature that you can use to basically automatically mark every other lap as a rest lap. Okay, so the next option is a more recent addition. It's called Rest Segments Optional. So what this does, it's kind of related to the last feature. Basically, it makes it so that athletes will not be forced to complete a final rest segment for lap events that have multiple segments within a lap, or if they are using this feature to disregard every other lap. So example is if you had a stair climb event, and let's say you had 2 segments, one going up the stairs, one going down the stairs. They don't want to say, in order for you to finish your lap, you have to come back around to the start after your final descent. They want to say, hey, if you've gotten to the top, you're done. You don't have to come back to the start and get another read in order to complete your final rest period, right? Because we really need that last read at the start in order to consider that lap completed. You got to go from the start to the top all the way back down to the start again. So you'd use this setting, and it's on by default, so you usually don't got to think about it, to say, hey, if they have a rest period that completes a lap, don't even worry about it. They're done once they hit the segment, they finish the segment just prior to that. So usually don't have to worry about this and just leave it on and it's not a problem. But that's how that works. It's basically saying, hey, if the final segment of a lap is a rest segment, I don't care about it, don't worry about it. They don't need to complete it in order for this entire lap to be considered finished. Okay, next, score with fastest lap times. This is a cool feature for a very specific use case. Basically, it totally changes how the scoring is done. It basically says instead of ranking participants based on who's done the most distance, it says for each participant, get their fastest X laps. Could be 3, 5, whatever. And then it totals the time between those fastest laps and then sorts everybody based on who has completed those amount of laps in the least amount of time. So you could say, hey, set this to 3, and then it would go through all the participants' laps, pick out their fastest 3, add up the times, and rank everybody based on who has done the fastest 3 laps alone. So it could be used for events where athletes are allowed multiple runs over a set course, and then they're scored based on their best 3 times added up. So I've heard mountain bike enduro events have done this, where they can do as many runs on the same course as they want to, and at the end of the day, they just want to see who's done the fastest run. single run. Or you could do who has done the fastest 3 combined. Or there's probably 100 other ways you could make this setting interesting. So it's just a pretty cool feature, but definitely good to understand. It's basically saying aggregate the fastest X laps for all participants and then rank everyone based on that. Okay, next we're going to talk about cutoff laps. So this is a way to say that you want to forcibly stop considering reads after some time or after some point. So by default, this is set to never, because by default, you usually are just trying to get as many laps as possible for everyone. But you can change it to say, hey, after 12 hours, I want no one's laps to be considered, because you really want to enforce a 12-hour cutoff or something like that. You can also make it after set laps or after set distance. So, and you could say that you're doing a, for whatever reason, you're doing a 50-lap race and you know you want it to be 50 laps, no more. You could just say everybody gets cut off after 50 laps in this way. So usually it's just set to never, but it's kind of up to you. Okay, related to that, we have a way to say, you know what, I don't want to cut off everyone. I don't want to stop collecting laps from everyone. I just have this one person who I know got pulled, but they're wandering around the finish area and they're continuing to get reads. How do I manage that? So if you click into a participant in RaceDay scoring, there's this adjustments panel. This allows you to adjust a variety of things, but the one relevant here is this read cutoff time. This is a setting that can be used not just in lap races, it can be used in other types of events too if you need to use it. Basically, it's just telling the system, after this time of day, I want you to ignore everything. So you could set it to any time of day, or you can just use that green button to set it to the current time. If, for example, you're using this for a last man standing event and you're getting reports of who gets dropped, you would come in here and just set it to the current time and say, hey, after right now, this person's done. I don't care if they get another read at the start finish area, don't consider it. So this is how you would say, this person, I do not want to consider more laps for, period. And you don't have to do it for everyone. So it's just nice, especially for those last man standing kind of events. Okay, next one, there's a setting called minimum finisher duration. It's kind of important for a very particular use case, not particular, but what you really want to do is think about if you are using RunSignup result notifications in your event, you'll want to consider how to set this. So if you aren't using RunSignup finisher notifications, you can probably skip ahead and leave this at the default. Just set it to immediate, because it usually doesn't matter if you aren't using RunSignup result notifications. The reason why it's important when you're doing result notifications is if you have this set to the default, as soon as someone finishes, they're going to be considered, or sorry, as soon as someone hits the first lap, they're going to be considered a finisher in RunSignup. And that for result notification means that they're going to get their text alerts sent right away as soon as their first lap. And that's not a great spectator experience. So there's basically, we have to tell RunSignup at what point the participant should be considered a finisher. Now, with lap races, you don't really know until they're done. They said they're completed, they've done this many laps, whatever. So this is where it starts to get interesting. You have to kind of figure out a time or a number of laps or something like that in which you want to start considering people a finisher and their notifications should go out. So it's just something to think about when you're deciding whether you want to use RunSignup text alerts for finisher notifications. Maybe it's a 12-hour run and you know your laps are taking about a half an hour each or something like that. You could set this to 11:15 or 11:30 hours, so that hey, once they get to like their second to last lap, send out their notification so that those people who are tracking them know, hey, they're approaching their final lap or something like that. So this is the same kind of setup as the cutoff laps. You can make it by a set time, after a set laps, or after set distance. So just something to think about. Next one is the option to show details as columns in the report settings area. So by default, the lap report doesn't show out like a giant table of all of the possible lap details. what we do is we have a very basic report that just shows you like the summary data. That means how many laps they've done, the total time, all the standard stuff, age, gender, whatever, age group, place, so on and so forth. But it doesn't give you an expanded detail view of every single lap and the time and the pace within each of those laps. If you want to show that, you have to check this box to say show details as columns, and then you have to tell the system how many laps you should show, because it's open-ended. We don't know how many laps people are going to do, so we don't know how many columns to put in the report. So you have to put in here a reasonable expectation of how many laps the winner is going to have, basically, so that by the end of the day, they'll have it filled out and everyone else will probably not. But the idea here, again, is just put in the max number of laps you expect to see, and then when you add your report, or if you just save this scored event, it'll include this column in there. But if you have already built reports and you're changing things around, you're going to have to add a new column called lap details expanded. Or if you wanted to build a new report, you'd have to add that manually yourself. And then that lap details column expanded field will generate all of the lap results for all of the laps. So basically over here in the report builder, I'm just showing you an example of what that looks like. You add columns, add lap details expanded, just type to search lap details expanded, and it'll blast in all of your lap stuff like this. Now, if you don't want to show pace for each of these or something, you can always edit the columns like you can with splits to say, I only want time, I want to hide pace. You can do that if you don't want to show pace, for example. Okay, so next thing, talking a little bit about advanced lap configurations. So we're talking before about the more standard single lap events, and we're gonna move on now to more advanced lap configs. But before we get there, I just wanna take a pause and see if there's any questions we should bring up. Let's see. A few people, or Steven's asking, is it possible to keep scoring based upon distance, but have a report for the fastest X number of laps, the separate report? So no, well, I guess you could, I think you could set up the scored event to be based on the fastest X and then build a different report that's just sorted by total time. But I'd have to play around with it. Actually, I'm not sure. I would just set up a test and try it out, see what happens. And then for the other, another question here, for the notifications, if someone drops out of a duration lap event, could we force them to be a finisher so they get a notification? I don't think you can force someone to, well, yeah, you can just remove their flag, the DNF flag on their participant record, and they will be considered a finisher then. All right, that's everything for now. So we'll jump back in and talk more about advanced lap configurations. So again, your basic stuff is one timing location, and people are just doing a loop over and over and over and over and over again. If you're doing multiple laps, then you want to change this setting in the scored events to say, no, I'm not using the defaults. I'm going to build my own custom ones. So just recall how laps are structured. They're a collection of segments where the start and finish of the entire lap is at the same location. So you can build laps out of any number of segments. For example, you might want to build one that goes to and from a checkpoint. You might also need to create additional timing locations if needed. So over here on the right, I have an example of what a long, short lap setup might look like. This is in segments. I've got a short loop, which goes from start point short loop to end point short loop. I've marked it as a lap segment. That means that this segment is a lap in and of itself. And then I have two more segments. I have one called start to checkpoint and one called checkpoint to start. So it's your out and back. So the out starts at the short loop and finishes at checkpoint. and the checkpoint to start starts at checkpoint and finishes at short loop. Now these two, they're not marked as a lap segment. They can't be because they don't start and finish at the same location. But I can build a lap by adding these two segments together. So you do start to checkpoint and then checkpoint to start, and there you go. You started and finished at the same location. So here, this is just going through more detail on the short option. So I've just got a, the start point and end point are the same, and I've marked this segment as a lap segment. And a more complicated setup, my two segments that are starting at a start finish and going to a checkpoint, and then coming back from that checkpoint to the start finish. Again, these should not be marked as a lap segment because they don't start and finish at the same location. So once you have all of your locations all set, or all your segments all set up like you'd have here, what you would do is, well, I'll talk about this first. So before we move on, one other thing that you may have seen in the segments as you're building them is there's an option in here to mark a segment as a rest segment. This is similar to that setting to disregard every other lap, which kind of does this automatically, but it may be useful in a more complicated multi-segment lap scenario. So a very common example is that stair climb event. So let's say you have a stair climb where you have a reader at the base of the stairs and a reader at the top of the stairs. Think of it like you have your start, finish, and then a checkpoint, right? It's essentially what it is. And you want to say, hey, the segment which is start, finish to top of the stairs, that's what I want to consider in their total time. The segment from top of the stairs to the bottom of the stairs, that I want to be considered a rest segment because I don't care about how fast it takes me to get down the stairs. That's irrelevant. So what you would do is set up your down segment as a rest period, and then you'll be all good to go. And then when you build your lap, you'll end up having one lap that goes from the bottom to the top to bottom, and the top to bottom is subtracted out from their total. Okay, so let's say I've got all my segments all built out. I'm now ready to actually set up laps. And if I go ahead and actually save it like this, I've built out a single lap option that's start finish to start finish, and I've built out two segments that go from one segment or one location to a different location and back. I'm going to get a little warning. It's going to pop up and it's going to say, hey, you've got two segments, to check and from check, that aren't included in any laps. Be sure to set up a lap for them. So this is what we're going to do now. If you see that message, you want to go in here and set up your laps because you haven't done it yet. As it stands, those segments aren't going to be used for anything. So you need to make sure that you set up laps before you actually start scoring the race. So in the laps area, you can basically create any number of different lap options that are available to runners, as long as the whole lap itself starts and finishes at the same timing location. So by default, we have our default generated lap here. It goes, it consists entirely of one segment called lap. Basically, it's just your standard start, finish, start, finish, start, finish, start, finish. So in our case, that's great for our short lap option, but I will need to add a lap for my long lap option. So at the bottom, you would first click add a lap, and then you would add two segments. This will drop in two drop downs here. And you would select from these drop downs the segments that you built in the last step. You would say, okay, I want this lap to be defined as runner has completed the to check segment followed by from check segment. Now, this works because remember, our to check starts at start finish and our from check ends at start finish. And it'll tell me here the total distance in this particular case was 2. It adds up the distance from the segments that create this lap in order to give you a total lap distance. So the distance is going to be a total of all segments within this lap. And now this is good to go. So now I've got a short lap and a long lap option. Participants, if they do start finish to start finish, we know that's a short lap. If they do start finish and then a check read and then a start finish, we know it's a long lap. And they can do any kind of combination of those that they'd like. So this is how we handle the multi-course option events with lap scoring. All right, so now let's get into viewing lap results, reporting, and publishing results. So we're going to talk about a few different things here. Let's get started. We do have some help guides on this if you wanted to read those. So lap results is a little bit different. First thing you'll notice, we display the total distance in the leaderboards up front here, so you can see and keep track of the distance covered for each participant as they go along. So what you can do in RaceDay scoring, if you don't already know, you can click a name and it'll bring you to their profile in the software where you can view a lot of result data right away. So you can click it and it'll bring you to this screen here where you can check out each of the occurrences at each of the locations. It will show you the occurrences, the timestamps, and so on. And then within here, if it's a lap race, you'll see this new button that says lap details at the top. This will bring you to a breakdown of all the laps that they completed, along with relevant information about how the times were considered within each of those laps. So if you click lap details, you would see something like this. So this is a good example of a race that had 2 lap options, a standard lap and a short lap. So this is very typical. It's a long, long day, and they want to make sure that when they're getting close to the time cutoff, that participants can do more distance if they can. They don't want to get them stuck halfway through the long lap and not have them count towards anything, right? So what you'll see here is that in this case, the final lap of the short lap. That's very typical. You'll see like many big laps and then a few short laps at the end, maybe. What's really cool about this is it allows you to troubleshoot all your times. So you'll see the start TOD and the finish TOD. This tells you this lap started and finished at these times. And in this case, you can see 5:47:39.1, 5:47:39.1. So that means that they are finishing and starting at the same exact time. So this means that there's no rest segments or anything like that happening between these two. It's just your standard. They're doing a loop over and over and over again. So this is just really good if you have any questions about how the calculations are being run for your lap races or which reads are being selected. You can come to this for reference to see, hey, this doesn't look right. We'll take a look at your time of day, and maybe the wrong read got selected or something for them. So let's say the wrong read was selected. What would you do? Well, back on this screen, that View Raw Reads button, that hops you over to the raw reads view, filtered to just show reads for the participant you're looking at. So here, from that screen, you can edit reads. You can say, I want to force this read to be used, or I want to force this read to be ignored, and so on and so forth. So you can adjust things on the fly in that way. Or let's say you wanted to just make a read shift a little bit. You can change the time for a given read in the raw reads panel as well. So just a good to know if you are scoring a lap race and want to learn how to troubleshoot things. You usually have a lot of time at lap races to troubleshoot, so you can spend your time looking at all of these times and figuring out why it's wrong. Okay, next, viewing lap results. You can also see this information in the default reports. So if you clicked into a report, you would see a lap details button. It's going to bring you to that same screen that we were just looking at where it shows the breakdowns like this. So in the reports, it'll look something like this. There's a lap details column. This will include a link, if you click it, back to that other screen so you can check in on someone's times. In addition, this lap details column will create all the lap details at RunSignup. So if you publish results and include this lap details column, it'll actually put in a table of all of the result details into the results at RunSignup. So you don't have to worry about doing the table view with the expanded column in order for all of the lap details to show at RunSignup. If you just publish the default report and it has the lap details column within it, you'll see at RunSignup all the details for each of the participants when you look at their individual result view, and I'll show that later on. So yeah, if you come in, do your standard stuff for auto-saving to RunSignup results, that'll just work like any other kind of race, so you don't really need to worry about that too much. If you do it for a lap race and you have that lap details column in there, you'll see on the individual record, it shows the lap time, pace, and distance for each and every single lap this person has completed, along with the standard stuff that you included in your report otherwise. So again, it won't show like on the table view all the lap details across. It'll just show it on the individual record, which usually is sufficient in my mind. If for whatever reason you really want to show 18 columns in the table, you can. I don't think it's a great user experience. They have to scroll all the way over to try and view all of the data, but you can do that if you'd like as well. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to customize lap reports. I think I've got everything covered, so we should be good now. Yeah, so we're gonna jump into how to customize lap reports. So I wanted to cover this because we have added a ton of different fields for lap races that can be utilized for lap results and kiosks and like, well, leaderboards, I guess, more than kiosks and things like that. So I'll give you some creative examples of how you could use these different fields in different situations. Might give you some cool ideas on how to utilize this because people can get bored of spectating at lap races. It's a very long day. Okay. So one of the more recent fields that we added was a grouping of fields about the last lap. So it's really important for lap races to be able to keep track of data that just happened. So for each and every single participant, it'll show, if you have one of these last lap fields, it will show the data about the last time or the last lap that they completed. So the latest one, the one they just finished off. So there's a few. There's last lap time, there's last lap name, and there's last lap time of day. And the last lap time is nice to show in a report. You can see, for instance, if you had a leaderboard built off of a report, it could show the time that it took for this person who just crossed to complete the lap they just completed. So it could show, oh, this person took 30 minutes or whatever. Now what's really cool is you could use the last lap time of day field as a override sort. So in RaceDay scoring, if you don't know already, you can build a report and make it sort any way you want, on any kind of time of day, on any kind of time field, whatever you want. You can just say, hey, this report, I want to change the sort entirely to be last name, first name. In this other report, I want to base it on who has done in this case, the last lap time of day. And I want to say descending, so uncheck ascending. So that way it's going to show at the top of the report the participant who just crossed the lap finish. And then you could add more information like their last lap time, their total number of laps completed. And in this way, you could build a report that you could use to display on like a leaderboard or something. So for example, I might have a report section in a report that looks like this. Shows the number of laps, the last lap time, and the total time. So in this case, it's giving me basically, and this, I didn't show the time of day, but basically if I did, it would have showed like, I think the person at the top here, their last lap was done at 4:55 a.m. But what's important to understand, it's not basing it on the total number of laps, the total distance, right? Because 16 shouldn't be at the top in that case. If it were the case, 17 would be in front. But maybe Oscar just had a faster last lap and sprinted ahead of Oscar or something like that. You can see, you know, Max had a pretty long last lap time, so he's slowing down. But basically, this would be a way to build out a report that you could auto-save to an HTML file and put on a leaderboard or something like that. So this is a really nice feature for those wanting to put out something for an on-course display. During the rest period, you could put up a leaderboard that's showing this report that's auto-saving to an HTML file. That would be a really nice use case for this. Okay, next, fastest and slowest lap fields. So we have these fields in the system that you can add that will allow you to put a column in that will show for this participant what was their fastest lap time, or what was their basically the fastest time for each and every lap option in the scored event they're a part of. So if it's like a single lap option, it's just fastest or slowest lap time. If you had multiple laps, it would show for each and every lap option, show me the fastest of that type. So for a standard event, it could be cool to show, hey, this person, you know, they weren't the fastest overall, but they had this really, really fast middle lap or something. So you could just like call out and say this person, their fastest time over all of them was this. You could have average lap time as well if you wanted to show that. I don't know why I'd really want to show slowest, but we included it just in case. Another field that's available to you is this total rest time. This is pretty nice if you are using rest segments and you want to call out how much time this participant has spent in the lap in the rest area for whatever reason. It might be useful for those events where you are skipping or disregarding every other lap to just show how much time they spent in the lap in the rest area. It's available to you if you wanted to add it right here. So all these like last lap fields and so on, you can use these reports like any other kind of report with the HTML autosave function in RaceDay scoring to build out a leaderboard that you could put on any kind of device. So these are really nice. It's really easy. You don't have to worry about like connecting another computer to a network. You don't have to worry about getting a kiosk display onto another computer. All you do is create an autosave in RaceDay scoring. If you're on the same network and you have a way to get to it, feel free to drop it into that network. I usually just say, hey, use Dropbox, put it into a syncing folder, and then it will show up on that second computer as long as it has internet connection, and it'll be made available to that. So it's just a nice, slick way to do leaderboards, I think. A lot easier than setting up a different computer with RaceDay scoring involved and trying to configure things to work a certain way. So if you haven't checked out this recent Timer Tip Tuesday, we go through in detail how to set up HTML leaderboards with scrolling functionality and so on. Definitely take a watch it, and you can learn a whole lot about the way you can use scrolling leaderboards by creating these HTML files in RaceDay scoring. It allows you to do all sorts of custom stuff, so definitely check it out if you're interested. And I think that's most of what I wanted to go through, and we're pretty close on time. So I'm gonna just now respond to, got some questions.
So great job, Matt. Really, really complex stuff that we're demonstrating today. Matt, I know it's a little bit of an edge case, but can you just show them really quick? Again, for that use case where we have a fixed time cutoff, and yet they want to add some distance at the end, maybe it's on a track and field. Can you just show them where they would do that adjustment?
Sure, yeah. This is a new one that we recently added. So if you need to do like, you have that example where they do a short lap and a long lap, but some people didn't do the short lap, the last one, they got halfway through the long lap and you wanted to give them some credit. There is a way to say, hey, I want to adjust this participant by adding 2 miles, and I'm gonna add in
Matt, you should open up your RaceDay scoring application a bit more, make it bigger.
Can you see it? Can you see it?
That's better. Yeah, that's better.
Sorry. Yeah. So you can just add right in here the lap distance adjustment and the time adjustment for that additional distance that you are adding right here. And this will just add in another lap for this person. Oh, sorry. It'll just add in another lap for this person, and you can view it right here. So at the end, they have an adjustment of 2 miles with 4 minutes tacked on. So you can do this on an individual level, but if you needed to, you can also do it through the standard import process. So in RaceDay scoring, if you do an import and you select the RunSignup registration ID or the RaceDay scoring participant ID, it'll work as an update, and you can map the time field to adjustments here, and you can actually do it that way as well. So you could say, hey, I'm going to make a spreadsheet. This group of people, these 10 people, all got halfway through their final lap or whatever. So you could create a spreadsheet and like import it that way if you needed to do it in mass. Or honestly, it's a lap race. You're there for like 24 hours. You can probably just go through the list and do these manually. But it's up to you. Let's see, asking, can you combine different events in the same last lap report? They have a 6, 20, 12, 24-hour race where they're all running together at the same time. No, you can't combine scored events for reporting purposes like that. But what I would suggest is, hey, just build a different version of the race where everybody's in one scored event and just use that for your leaderboards. Well, assuming they're all doing the same course, because like it wouldn't make any sense if they were doing different courses. Another thing you could do is just have everybody in one scored event. If everyone's doing the same course, you could just break out your reports based on the registration events instead of building out all the different courses in each of the different scored events. That might be easier for you to think about doing, because then you don't have to recreate your timing location, your segment definitions for each and every single scored event you have if they're all basically the same and they're the same distance loops and stuff. So maybe consider that instead of having them all separate, do it like that. And if they have different start times, maybe then, yeah, it's complicated. You got to have different corrals to have different start times based on the registration event. It's still possible, but things to think about. Okay, they're asking for team relay. Every person on the team has the same bib. Is there a way to have the team name versus a person on the team name in the results, or without using team reports, or does team reports cover it? Yeah. So if you in RaceDay scoring, when you set up your scored events, if you say that this is a relay team scored event, you can use this option to say that all the team members have the same bib or not. If they don't, it will look at each individual bib and bubble up the results to the team info. But in any case, when you have a relay scored event, so everybody in this scored event is a relay team, it switches. So instead of showing individual results, it shows team results. It will show basically, let me see if I have an example of one that has. I don't know if I have an example, but it'll show the team names for the results instead of individual names. There's a field that will list out all the individuals on that team, but it'll show the main name will be a team name. Okay, so Angel is asking, when you are timing for the fastest lap scenario, for example, can you have 32 bikers and get the fastest 16 to move on and do the bike race again with the fastest 16 and do it again for the next fastest 8 and so on? That's a pretty wild example. I haven't heard of anyone doing that before, but you could, I think you could do that. What I would probably do is score it the first way with, you know, the number of fastest laps set to 16 or whatever it is, and then back it up to the cloud and call it first run. And then start over from fresh, score it again as the second run, back it up to the cloud, and then score it again as the next fastest 8, and so on. That's probably what I would do. So you're keeping basically your scoring files completely separate. You're just saying, okay, I'm going to start fresh with each version of this race file. That's probably what I'd suggest. All right. I think that's everything. Anything else from you saw, David or James, that I should bring up?
No, just a great job, Avery. Again, our hats off are to all timers that do lap events. Very complex, very difficult, and you know, just really hats off to you if you're doing lap races. And Avery, you did a great job presenting very complex information. So thank you.
You did a great job developing complex information. So thanks again for coming, everyone. We'll talk to you later at the next Timer Tip Tuesday. Bye.
Brian said to like and subscribe.